Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim Richman here together with Yitzchak Reuven, and today, the 6th day of Av, 5779. It's the 7th of August, 2019, and the Shabbat. We begin the 5th book of the Torah, Sefer Devarim, with Parshat Devarim. And the Shabbat is actually Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. But there is no public mourning observed on Shabbat, so the fast of Tisha B'Av is deferred to Saturday night and Sunday. And it's a very, very unusual kind of Shabbat. And we speak more about that in our Torah study this week on Parshat Devarim, the unusual confluence of this Shabbat, which is also Shabbat Chazon, the Sabbath of vision, the Sabbath of the vision of the Holy Temple, and as far as the calendar is concerned, it is the 9th of Av itself. But out of the holiness of Shabbat, the fasting and other public observances of mourning are deferred. And if you notice, we did not begin our program this week with music, as is our custom on Temple Talk for this particular week, the week of Tisha B'Av, because it is customary to lessen our mirth. That is the expression in the tomes of Jewish law. We do not engage in music. Is one of the ways of exhibiting joy is music, and so we curtail our happiness this week as a sign of these days of mourning, wherein we are instructed not to lose our focus from our mourning the loss of the Holy Temple. And that's really the object and purpose of all of the customs of mourning for the Jewish people. When, God forbid, a person is actually mourning for a relative, the purpose of the aspects of mourning are so that a person's mind is not distracted from concentrating on the loss itself. And of course, that is the situation of all of Israel now during these 3 weeks of what's called Between the Straits, Bein HaMitzarim, coming to a crescendo now in these final days before the 9th of Av, coinciding with Parshat Devarim. And one of the big questions that people always ask every year is the concept of fasting on the 9th of Av, is it still relevant to us? It's a big debate, I think, in society here in Israel, where people feel that because we have the state of Israel, we have sovereignty in the Jewish homeland, so to speak, we have, as it were, a Jewish commonwealth, people wonder what the connection is still to the vision of the Holy Temple, and they wonder if it's maybe outdated, they wonder if maybe we're stuck in the past, and if Judaism has not actually evolved. That's the expression a lot of people use, Judaism has evolved, and there's no reason to be fixated anymore on the building of the temple. The thing is, though, and we've really tried to emphasize this in our teachings over the years, that when we talk about the loss of the temple, and both holy temples, were destroyed on Tisha B'Av, we're not talking about a physical building. We're not talking about the seat of sovereignty of the Jewish people. We're not talking about anything like that on that level at all. We're talking about really the state of the world and man's alienation from God, and the state of affairs really all over the world. That's what the temple comes to address. The whole idea of what's missing from our lives is the aspect of the depth of our relationship with God. That's really what's missing, and that's really what we're mourning. We're mourning our inability to be elevated to this higher consciousness of divine connection all the time. You look around at the world, what's been going on. It's just unspeakable. The tragedies, the senseless killings, the insensitivity to human life, the affliction of so many people, and so much exploitation, and such evil that's rampant in the world. This is really what the concealment of the divine presence is all about. And so the message of the Holy Temple really is a message of hope for all humanity to be united and in true peace and in true understanding and in true spirit of love. I know that must sound corny in this day and age to even talk about, like hope and love and peace and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if people still talk like that anymore, but that's really what this is really all about. And it's very short-sighted and somewhat myopic to think that when we're mourning for the Holy Temple, that we're just mourning for our little thing, for our building, for our shul, for our lifestyle, or even worse, if you think it's about supremacy or about sovereignty or anything like that. It's not. The Holy Temple is the Torah's plan for how humanity can reconnect with its own divine essence, and how the world could be elevated and unified around the Spirit of God that is the purpose of creation. And that's exactly what's missing from the world. That's exactly what's wrong with every news headline that we've been reading. It's a godless world that we live in.
So, Rabbi, you asked a question, or you stated a question that's been asked, and you also made another statement. It's the question that's been asked, which we hope to address, is it still relevant to mourn the loss of the Holy Temple in today's age in Israel, where we have sovereignty, etc., etc. And then you said that the loss of the temple itself is not merely the loss of a physical building, but it's the loss of a deeper and higher connection with God, and a deeper realization of God's presence in the world. Yet, the physicality of the Holy Temple and its location are essential for
its fulfillment.
Okay,
and because of the specific nature of its location, and because of that very particular scenario, it is the whole temple movement and the whole desire that we have to see it rebuilt, and the whole process of mourning for the temple is misconstrued as an issue of sovereignty and as a cult of nationalism. But it's not about real estate at all. It's and by the way, this is normative Judaism, because people that talk this way, that talk about how the preeminent in our lives is the desire to see the rebuilding of the temple, people are still branded by the media as being messianic, as being right wing, or as being ultra nationalist, or as being ultra religious, whatever it is. This is normative Judaism. Normative Judaism maintains, based on every prophet of the Bible, based on the simplest reading of the Torah and of Jewish history, normative Judaism maintains that the Holy Temple is the secret of mankind's survival. And what it's really all about is about the rectification of relationships, not only our relationship with God, but of our connection with each other, with all people, with all of nature, with the world around us. And it's very specific. It's very specific because that's the center of creation, because that's the Garden of Eden, because because no two places are alike. Yeah, it's not in Baltimore, and it's not in New Delhi. It's in Jerusalem. It's on the Temple Mount. But our mourning, and the Tisha B'Av mourning, is not bemoaning the temple. And there are plenty of people who think it is, but I'm saying they're missing it, because it's about bemoaning the world without the temple, because the world without the temple has lost its moral compass, it's lost its dignity, it's lost its sensitivity for sure, it's lost its reverence for life. We live in a time when life itself is almost meaningless to so many people, and to anticipate the rebuilding of the Holy Temple and to want that is a reflection of an innate spiritual purity. in the collective body of Israel. And so even if we're off base, even if we've forgotten, even if we're out of touch, even if the exile has made its mark on Israel, still in the collective consciousness, the expression of this collective Jewish soul is the desire to see the temple become a reality. And that's a very innocent thing. It's not dangerous, it's not extreme, it's not a challenge to peace, it's the secret of peace.
And now you've answered the question, I think. Is it still relevant today to mourn the loss of the Holy Temple? And you're saying it very much so, because it's not simply mourning the loss of some bricks. It's mourning
people observe Tisha B'Av in all sorts of different ways, and so for some, it's a day that's truly filled with introspection and anguished reflection over the spiritual vacuum caused by the departure of the divine presence. For other people, the day is more symbolic of the many horrors that have been inflicted upon the nation throughout our histories. But as I said, other people question if the day is even relevant at all, especially in the context of the modern state of Israel's rebirth. So what I'm saying is that even those with a minimal attachment to Israel's tradition know that, first of all, the Temple Mount is our nation's uncontested and unparalleled spiritual center, past, present, and future. And I'm saying what the Torah teaches is that the temple, the Holy Temple, is the source of everything. It's the source of the whole elusive peace that we've all been seeking so fervently, right? As the prophet Haggai say, "For in this place I shall grant peace." And that's the whole idea here of what this is all about. And it's the fact that we have the blessing of the state of Israel and that we've come as far as we've come makes the question even more relevant, really, because we're not done. This isn't it. This isn't the goal yet. This is not the perfection of Hashem's plan. So it's very, very poignant, really, that this is not so understood by people. And of course, many very fervently religious Jews believe that, yes, we really do need to see the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, but it's something that's completely out of our hands. It's something that's going to come about in a mystical way. It's going to come about in a miraculous way. It's going to come about in a way that is totally supernatural.
Totally not up to me.
Totally not up to me. And that also is not true. So the question is, how do we regard this loss, and how do we mark this period?
So how do we mark this period? We keep referring to the period as a period of mourning, 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 which I don't know if that's such a great word. Certainly, I don't know how relevant that word is today, because there's many ways to mark the period. Where, people go up to the Temple Mount more frequently during these 9 days. People study. There are conferences. There's lots of things going on that aren't mourning, but they are focused on the Holy Temple, focused on the Temple Mount, focused on rebuilding. And those are other ways that are very, very relevant to mark this period in a serious and somber and sober way. That's not, the idea of just, lying on the ground in ashes and beating your breast may not be so relevant.
And the somberness also, honestly, at the risk of sounding irreverent, because I'm really not, the somberness might not be that relevant. Again, the idea is not to feel bad. The idea is to show. Even the rituals of mourning that have developed around this period of time, and that are part of the prayer service and the way that we conduct ourselves on Tisha B'Av itself, as far as refraining from certain things. It's not about feeling bad. It's about demonstrating that there's something terribly wrong with our lives, that we're not connected to our own souls. That I think after nearly 2,000 years of mourning for the temple's destruction, maybe we should be forgiven for asking very frankly, and a lot of people do ask, how exactly is it going to happen that the temple is going to be rebuilt? And this is the problem. The problem is that, just like all over the world, Jews can conclude their Passover Seder with the words "next year in Jerusalem." I always feel like asking, what's wrong with this year? Are the tickets too expensive? Are no hotel rooms left? What? It's always mañana. It's always next year. It's always something's going to happen. Something out of our control, something out of our power is going to change. The dynamic is going to change, and everything is going to be different. And the same thing with the eve of Tisha B'Av. If the final meal is concluded before the fast, people make their way to the synagogue and they wish each other, God willing, we won't have to fast this year, because the assumption is that the Messiah, should come and the temple will be rebuilt in the next few minutes. And that isn't the way it's going to happen. The way it's going to happen is that the Jewish people collectively are going to decide that enough is enough, and we're ready to take responsibility. It's always like a blame game, it's basically we're blaming God all of this time. The same, and it's all very sincere, people's desire, but it's all a fantasy. It's the same kind of thing with the idea that the temple is going to fall from heaven. It's not an authentic Jewish concept. The essence of Torah is about doing God's will. He commands and we fulfill. And so the question is, what is going to change the current reality? The idea of Tisha B'Av happening every year is not just, to keep us browbeaten, to remind us that we're in exile or something like that. The idea is, if you wanted to change it, change it. We've spoken about this a great deal over the years, and we touch upon it briefly, one aspect of it in this week's lesson as well. But the idea is, people have it in their heads that God is going to take care of the whole thing for us. And there's no such concept that we wait for Him to
Not only do
fulfill
they
the
have that
commands
in their
for us.
heads, but there are those who feel that any talk about rebuilding the whole the Holy Temple, or even going up to the Temple Mount, et cetera, is somehow endangering and jeopardizing the idea that God's going to do it. It's not only do they.
It's like their attitude is like, don't touch the whole thing.
Right.
Stay away.
Anything
Stay
you
away
might
from
do
this whole thing.
is only going to work against.
Right.
Against
Don't
the
upset
time.
the apple cart.
Right.
And this is a little bit
Problematic.
Huh?
Problematic.
It's more than problematic. It's kind of sick because I'm sorry. No, I'm not. You know that, and this is a source that we have many occasions to quote, but a very important letter written by Maimonides, Igeret Hashmad, called the Letter on Persecution. He writes there, the illustrious Maimonides, the Rambam writes, that none of the Torah's commandments are in any way dependent on the arrival of the Messiah for them to be fulfilled. And it's such a mind-blowing concept for a lot of people who think that we're supposed to be waiting here for Mashiach to come and tell us that the time has come now, that we're free, that He's going to build it, that we're in the dawning of a new era. He's going to give us permission. But we already have permission. We already received permission. And the truth is that according to the whole structure of how Torah works, it's God that's waiting for us to do. So he writes there in that book, in that letter, Igeret Hashmad, he writes that the task of Mashiach is not to fulfill a particular commandment or to authorize Israel that the time has come to do so, but rather that the performance of the mitzvot, of the commandments, is for Israel to fulfill all the commandments that were given at Mount Sinai, regardless of when the Messiah arrives. And that's our job. Our job is to do our best. So there's a lot that's crept into the mindset, subconsciously or however, by osmosis, or as an idiosyncratically odd defense mechanism over the years. But the fact is, it's more relevant than ever for the flowering of the people of Israel and for the perfection of their contribution to humanity. We are dependent on the temple for that scenario to be fulfilled, because we are dependent on the revelation of the presence of God in the world.
For
I'll tell you.
anybody who says, well, Jerusalem's been rebuilt and it's flourishing and it's full of life and activity, if you go up to the Temple Mount, you eyewitness the destruction. You eyewitness the fact that it's a wasteland. And as more and more people do go up from all walks of life here in Israel, that realization, that consciousness spreads, and so it's become less remote. The whole discussion, less fantasized, less a fantasy, and more based in reality. I mean, there is a reality on the Temple Mount that doesn't jibe with the idea that we've returned, we have sovereignty,
Because we don't really have sovereignty
we don't
on the
there.
Temple
I'm saying
Mount.
right there, you go
And
there and you see.
And there a Jew is not permitted to pray. You know what? Our goal this Tisha B'Av really has to be to try and understand more deeply and to try and feel more deeply what this whole thing is all about, who we are as a people and where we're going. And again, it's really the plight of the world. The news is so bad, That's why lately, the past few weeks on Temple Talk, I said, let's not even discuss the news. It's so horrible, what's going on in the world, and it seems that the common denominator of everything is a lack of sensitivity, a lack of reverence for life. It's like humanity is just gone crazy,
Walking off a cliff.
and that's really what the Holy Temple is here to address. It's here to be like an anchor, a focal point of the divine soul within humanity, crying out for connection with God and holiness, and that's certainly what's missing from everyone, from everything. And that's our dream, that's our prayer, that's our aspiration, and that's what this special time of year comes to remind us, that the picture is totally incomplete without the Holy Temple. And it's worthwhile one day here to really show how deeply we feel that. That's what Tisha B'Av is all about. Hope to see you on the Temple Mount. Tisha B'Av
Willing.
morning.
We'll talk about that also
Sunday
in the
morning.
second half, Sunday on the Temple Mount, in light of the fact that it's also a
Oh, right. We're
holiday.
not sure yet if it's going to be open. Hopefully it will be open. All right. We'll be right back for the second half of Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 6th day of the month of Av, 5779, August 7th, 2019. You may have noticed, again, no music. That is because we're in the 9 days of Av, the final, what's the word I'm looking for? Shlav, the final countdown, I guess, of the 3 weeks, Bein HaMitzarim, between the straits, 3 weeks of mourning, of contemplation, of introspection concerning the destruction and loss of the Holy Temple, which physically took place 1,949 years ago, and it is a loss that reverberates through our reality every day, as the Rabbi was talking about and explaining so eloquently in the first half of the show. And I'd like to simply shift our discussion, not a whole lot, because it's all very relevant. It's all part of the same thing, to this week's Parshat. We're in a new book, the fifth and final of the 5 books of Moses, the 5 books of the Torah. We're beginning the book of Devarim, in English known as Deuteronomy. And the book of Devarim is all about, well, it contains the words of Moshe, as opposed to the first 4 books of Torah, which I think as a rabbi likes to put it, was a top-down, how do you say it, a top?
From the top to the bottom, from heaven to earth. That was the
That's-
direction of
it
the
was
speech.
God's words spoken to Moshe, who then related them to Israel. And now in this fifth book, it's Moshe's words. It's coming from Moshe's heart. It's his recollections. It's his memoirs. But mostly it's his sometimes his castigation or reprimand of the people, and much of it, as we read into it, is this beautiful, beautiful encouragement. And it's a better word than encouragement, is getting people ready, getting the nation ready to enter.
The whole book of Devarim is really about preparation for coming into the land of Israel. This was the eve of this generation coming into the land. It's not the generation that left Egypt. They perished in the desert. It's their children, and the whole Torah is about to come to fruition, as it were, because it was given at Sinai in order to be lived in the land of Israel. And this whole book of Deuteronomy is taking place within a 5-week period. Moshe begins speaking on the first day, Rosh Chodesh, of the month of Shvat. 5 weeks later, on the 6th of Adar, he's informed that he's going to pass away. And on the 7th of Adar, he passed away. And this is his last will and testament. This is his exhortation. It's all about, I mean, the whole book of Devarim is saturated with the love of the land of Israel, and he's not even going to go in. But It's all about preparing his people for that passage.
Now we're reading it on this Shabbat, which is the 9th of Av, and we always read Parshat Devarim either on the Shabbat before the 9th of Av, or years like this, when the 9th of Av is on Shabbat, it's on the Shabbat of the 9th of Av. And it's particularly poignant in that much of the Parsha is taken up by Moshe's recollection of the sin of the spies and his attaching his own fate of not going into the land to the sin of the spies. And it's poignant to me, Rabbi, because here we are today. Getting back, this is also very relevant to what we were talking about earlier. Today we're in the land of Israel. Each and every one of us, great and small, with whatever things we've achieved and whatever things we haven't achieved in life, we're all here. Something that Moshe Rabbeinu was not zoche to. He was not allowed to enter into the land. And here we are, fulfilling his dream, and with the ability to carry out and to carry on the mission that he's set out for Israel, and that is to complete the inheritance of the land and to build the holy temple. And each one of us has an obligation to ourselves and to God, and also to Moshe Rabbeinu, to do our part to fulfill the destiny that he so profoundly and beautifully outlined for Israel. So it's a very poignant. I just thought that's just the word to me. That's poignant that we read this parsha on this Shabbat. And on the one hand, we all know that on Shabbat we don't mourn, and we certainly celebrate Shabbat. We certainly, we eat and we sing songs and we do everything we do on every Shabbat, because we don't have any mourning on Shabbat, which just kind of makes it even more poignant, because here we are, where we need to be, doing what we need to be doing on Shabbat. And there's Moshe Rabbeinu calling to us from thousands of years ago and saying, I'm not going to make it, but you are, and you need to fulfill what we've been commanded to do. It's hard to ignore that.
So on Sunday we will be observing all of the rites of Tisha B'Av, all of the public mourning of Tisha B'Av.
Sunday being the 10th of Av.
Yes, it'll be the 10th of Av, and according to the Talmud, actually the majority of the temple burnt on the 10th of Av.
Mm-hmm.
It began on the 9th, but the majority burnt on the 10th. Sunday, August 11th is when we'll be observing the fast. We refrain from eating, drinking, wearing leather shoes, bathing, anointing, marital relations. Of course, we refrain from music, and we also have a special prayer service of Lamentations and the Kinot, the dirges. There are those of us that will be attempting to ascend the Temple Mount. That's a very important thing to do on Tisha B'Av. If we're permitted by the police, there's some question about that because of the confluence of a Muslim holiday. They haven't announced yet if it's going to be open. I want to point out something we were discussing before, that the prehistory of Tisha B'Av is that the spies came back, the spies from Parshat Shalach in the book of Numbers, they came back to the camp of Israel and they delivered their evil report on the state of affairs in the land of Canaan. And they basically caused the hearts of the children of Israel to sink and to sink into despair. And their whole negative report about the land was based on a pessimistic, negative way of looking at things. And we know from the portion of Shalach, as we studied in depth, that was very much connected to their own self-image as well, their own negativity. And it's very telling, the way you look at things, especially getting back again to that question, is it relevant, isn't it relevant, the whole concept of Tisha B'Av. Here in the state of Israel today, there's a lot of people that view the state of Israel and the problems that we have, they view it with a lot of negativity. People are very down on things. And I think that there's a connection. I think that if we, we're talking about the mourning of Tisha B'Av. How relevant is it? Even you and I. How do we feel? How relevant do we feel it is when we really should be building? I'm tired of mourning. I don't even know why we're acting like this. It's not, as if it's out of our hands. As if all we can do is express our grief. No, there's more that we can do. There's a lot more that we can do. But I think that if we really don't want to have to go through the cycle of mourning every year, we need to see to it that our mourning is focused and purposeful, and that it serves on the national level, not only on the individual level, it serves as a motivation to stop the cycle of pain, right? This is what we're calling upon for our brethren to internalize. Don't just say next year in Jerusalem, but live it. And if we are commanded to begin preparing for the building, then yes, like you mentioned, we have to be learning and reflecting on what that means. We have to be preparing for it. The mourning that we're going to be doing on Tisha B'Av is very, very important. It's not without meaning. It's extremely important and constructive as a vehicle that can aid in the psychological rehabilitation of a person who's suffered an irreparable loss, as we have. But it has to be accompanied by proper resolve. And that the only way that it's not going to be a self-deception and a ruse, what I like to call what I don't like to, but what I call the mourning game, the only way that it won't be a game is if it's accompanied by resolve, that we really have to see to it that the scenario changes.
And certainly there are many Jews here and in the diaspora who are so disassociated the 3 weeks and the 9 days from the temple itself that they've turned it into an opportunity or an occasion in the year for a sort of a self-improvement retreat, that we take these 9 days to
treat people better,
nicer,
and to speak nicely, and to be very careful how we talk about other people, and like you say, self-improvement. And listen, that's very valuable, and it's very beautiful.
It's very valuable 365 days a year.
Exactly. We should be more conscious and sensitive of how we treat other people all year round, not just during the 9 days, because of the idea that it was hatred amongst brothers that destroyed the temple. If that's our direction, then we have to really improve ourselves altogether. But again, we can't use that as an excuse. That's not what this is all about. What this is all about is that God is waiting on us to act. We were talking about going up to the Temple Mount, God willing, on Sunday, to be seen there by Hashem, to vote with our feet, to show that this is the place that means more than anything else in the world to us, that this is where we were commanded to build a temple, that this is the place of the divine presence, that this is the promise of the future redemption of all humanity. I wanted to mention there was an item in the news a few days ago. I think it was from Rosh Chodesh Av.
Mm-hmm.
A group of Israeli tourists went to Jordan to pray at the tomb of Aaron, the high priest, brother of Moshe.
Who died on Rosh Chodesh
Yes,
Av?
because Rosh Chodesh Av, the first day of the month of Av, a few days ago, is the anniversary of the passing, traditionally, of Aaron.
And we just read in last week's Parshat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so a group of Israelis went to the tomb of Moses to pray.
I think I read the number 500. They said there were 500.
Yes, it was a large group. And what happened was they were prevented from praying there. But more than that, the treatment that they received from the Jordanian authorities was absolutely outrageous. And the Jordanian Ministry of the Waqf, which is the same Waqf that controls the affairs on the Temple Mount, they ordered that the site be closed because there was a video that was circulating in Jordan of the Jews praying there, and the Jordanian media said that this group of Jews held religious Talmudic services at Aaron's tomb. And so the tour guide had said that they coordinated with the army and the police, and that they had a Jordanian guide and policeman, and everything was the way it was supposed to be, but yet they were stripped down. Women's headscarves were taken off. Everyone's religious garments were confiscated. And the official statement that Jordan made was that the decision to close the holy site was because it was illegal entrance of the tourists. And it was really, really amazing to read about. I believe we had this posted on the Temple Institute's Facebook page as well. So the group claimed that the treatment was horrible. They were stripped. They took their yarmulkes away. They took off their shirts to see if they had tzitzis. They confiscated any kind of religious symbols. And of course, if this was this kind of humiliation of an Arab on our side who wanted to enter Jerusalem, and they would dare to tell him to take off his shirt or confiscate his Quran, everybody would be talking about. So it's an absolutely amazing situation, and I was reflecting on the fact that we have this peace treaty with Jordan, which was actually signed on October 26, 1994. And I seem to recall something from that peace treaty that contradicted the way these tourists were treated at Aaron's tomb. So I looked it up to see what it was that we signed. I'm looking at it now, and I'm talking in like Article 9 of the peace treaty, called Places of Historical and Religious Significance, says each party will provide freedom of access to places of religious and historical significance. And then it goes on to say in Article 11, mutual understanding and good neighborly relations. The parties will seek to foster mutual understanding and tolerance based on shared historic values, and accordingly to undertake to abstain from hostile or discriminatory propaganda against each other, to take all possible legal and administrative measures to prevent the dissemination of such propaganda by any. Anyway, it goes on and on and on about normal relations between two countries. And again, I'm bringing this up because Aaron, the high priest, represents, again, like a certain kind of hope for humanity. His whole deal that he's known for is this brotherly love and this tolerance and this non-judgmental approach towards people. And it's the same body, the Waqf, that controls the religious sites in Jordan that Israel ostensibly has given control of the Temple Mount to. So it's funny because it's like we can't pray at the Temple Mount because of the Jordanian Waqf, and we can't, and at least they're consistent. I'm saying they're absolutely consistent because they also wouldn't let us pray at Aaron's tomb in Jordan. It's like what could I say?
And the Temple Mount, they make a claim that it's the third holiest place in Islam, even though there seems to be no Islamic history that's really related, relevant to the Temple Mount. In
fact, by the way, we mentioned, I'm sorry to interrupt you, in fact, we mentioned that on this Sunday, August 11th, which is the day that Tisha B'Av will be observed, as of this moment that we're going to Mike, we're concerned, will we be allowed to go up at the Temple Mount? Won't be, because the police haven't issued a clear message yet, although we do hope that they will announce that we will have access to our question is, because there's also a Muslim festival on that day, Eid al...
Achda.
Yeah, what is it?
Achda.
Right, which is the day that the Muslims commemorate the binding of Ishmael, not the
Ishmael.
binding of Isaac.
But where?
And that event, according to the Quran, did not take place in Jerusalem.
Of course not. It took place in Arabia on Mount Arafat.
So anyway,
no, but what I wanted to say is that, so they claim that the Temple Mount is so important, Al-Aqsa is so important to the Muslims that they're very sensitive about the Jews, presence there. But the tomb of Aaron, has no significance. So like,
and
what's their beef there?
Well, I
Like,
guess
what's the
they
problem?
claim
They
that
just don't
allegiance
like
to
us.
Aaron. They claim that he was a prophet of importance to them,
course
and
he's
so
a
they don't want to
prophet
see
of
us
importance.
sullying and
Right.
degrading the tomb of Aaron, the Jewish priest, by praying there. But the articles that were in the news, that are in the media, about this incredible event that happened, where these Israelis were detained and sent away and threatened with arrest and everything, the articles went on to say that they were warned that they may not pray anywhere in Jordan, because Jewish prayer is just like disgusting, or I don't know what. They're afraid it's going to bring about the redemption, the coming of the Messiah. It's like they were warned, and Israeli tourists are regularly warned they cannot even pray in their hotel room. And they were told by this Jordanian official, this group, that even if they were to be in the middle of the desert somewhere with no one around, they must not pray. They must not pray anywhere.
I know in the past, and I'm sure it still exists, that Jews aren't allowed to bring tefillin or a talit. Somehow this group did bring it in, but I guess it's not always enforced. But yeah, you mentioned the waqf.
No, it
but
is
the waqf-
enforced, and they said that it was illegal, and they said that they didn't know how it happened, and this is why they were very upset, and this is why they confiscated everything afterwards.
You mentioned the Jordanian waqf as being responsible for this, but the Jordanian waqf is run by the King of Jordan, who personally appoints all the members of the waqf, and it has been his mission, it seems, in the past few years to be as antagonistic to Israel as he possibly can.
And the peace treaty isn't worth a thing. It's absolutely ridiculous what we read there. This is not fulfilled in any way whatsoever.
Any security arrangements that we ever had with Jordan, which are the only worthwhile arrangements, existed before the treaty, and they would exist anyway because they are, of course, they're mutually advantageous, but without Israel's military and security support, Jordanian monarchy would be history a long time ago.
I don't know what we do it for. I don't know what we give them all our water for, all of our scientific cooperation, agricultural cooperation. They would not be able to exist without the state of Israel propping them up. But it's just, again, so ironic on the eve of Tisha B'Av, because the Holy Temple is, as it says in Isaiah 2, the house of prayer for all people. In fact, there's a prophecy from Isaiah that we should mention because of our immensely popular new short film, which is online now, Tisha B'Av, People Get Ready. And the verse from Isaiah says that all the nations will stream to the mountain of Hashem. The mountain of Hashem will be raised above all the mountains and exalted above all the hills, and all the people will stream to it. And when the temple stands, it is for the whole world, and that is like so, ironic considering the behavior of Jordan and their total animosity and repulsion at the thought, the possibility of a Jew praying anywhere in Jordan, even in the middle of the desert. And by the way, the great irony, again, of all of this, and why this story is so important for this broadcast, is because right now, as we read in Parshat Devarim, this is where Moshe and the children of Israel are standing, on the other side of the Jordan. And if you look at the map, like in the Art Scroll Tanakh or in any a biblical map of the borders and the tribes, this is like Reuven and Gad and half of Manasseh, right where this is happening, and so there they are. Moshe's about to speak, and actually the news for the Jordanian Waqf is that this is Eretz Israel. So when the Jew wants to pray in the middle of the Jordanian desert, it's because this is Eretz Israel, as it is.
Yeah, pretty sad. Again, you mentioned our video, which is on YouTube, and it's been getting very popular and has been reported about in media all over the world. And again, the message there, I don't want to give it away, but the message I think is pretty clear, and that is it's basically everybody's responsibility to be part of the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, because it is meant for everybody in the world.
And that's the most important. The most important part of the message is that the loss of the Holy Temple is something that affects all of humanity, and the rebuilding is something that will affect all of humanity, and that it is for all people.
And so when we say people get ready, we mean people get ready for a big change in the world. And as you mentioned earlier in the opening of the show, the world really is in need of a change for the better.
Amen.
Thanks for being with us. We wish everybody a meaningful Tisha B'Av.
May we merit truly to the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in our time.
Amen. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.